Morning, everyone, and welcome to the CPUC's presentation on water affordability, safety, and accessibility. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat window. We'll begin the presentation shortly. All right, let's go ahead and begin. Next slide, please. My name is Hope Chrisman. I am a local government and community liaison with the California Public Utilities Commission. If you don't already know who your local liaison is, please reach out to one of us so we can introduce you to our team. Our role is to assist you when you have questions or need information on the utilities under our jurisdiction, CPUC regulations and proceedings, as well as to provide guidance on how to participate in our proceedings. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded. Next slide. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat window. We will be monitoring the chat window, and we will have time throughout the presentation to respond to your questions. To avoid confusion, please do not use acronyms in your questions and comments. Next slide. Today's presenter will be Kevin Prong, Regulatory Analyst here at the California Public Utilities Commission. Kevin will be discussing the CPUC's role in water reliability, along with other water-related topics and issues. Kevin has been with the Commission's Water Division since 2014. He continues to work on important water issues in California, including affordability, conservation, quality, and acquisitions. He is a representative for the Water Division at the Low Income Oversight Board and has served as temporary advisor to 2 commissioners. He graduated from UC San Diego in 2012 with an engineering degree, which he thought were the toughest years of his life until he became a dad to 2 girls with endless amounts of energy. Please welcome Kevin.
Hi, thank you. Going to request control of the presentation. All right. Thank you. All right. Yes, so hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, I am a girl dad. Shout out to all the girl dads out there and to any parent as well. It's not easy dealing with these little roller coasters we call kids. Well, let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about Water Division, who we are, and what we do. Right. So the Water Division consists of 28 people, making it the smallest of the industry divisions at the Commission. We are divided into 2 sections, the first one being the Administrative Law Judge Support and Compliance section. They are responsible for advising the commissioners and the judges in formal proceedings related to water. In those proceedings, the section provides technical assistance to calculate and analyze rates, and they also manage the filings that come in from the large water utilities. The other section is the small water and sewer utility section, who are responsible for performing a comprehensive review of the water utilities in what is called a general rate case, or GRC for short. The small water section ensures that the small water utilities are financially sound and are complying with current regulations, and they manage the small water filings to the Commission. All right, you might have been wondering, what do I mean by large and small water? I'll start off by first saying the Commission does not regulate municipals or government-owned water utilities or mutual water companies. The Commission only regulates investor-owned water utilities, which are essentially private for-profit companies. And they make up about 16% of California and serve roughly 6.8 million throughout the state. So that means quite a bit of traveling for our Water Division staff. who are mainly based in San Francisco or Sacramento. I used to blame my bad knees on playing basketball, but I think I'm going to start blaming it on these long drives. Anyways, the commission regulated water utilities are separated into 4 classes. Class A utilities have over 10,000 connections. The largest Class A, such as California Water Service and Golden State Water Company, not the Warriors, the water company, have well over 200,000 connections. I'm a Laker fan, by the way, go Lakers. The Class Bs, which there are only 3 left, have between 2,000 and 10,000 connections. Class Cs are between 500 and 2,000, and any water utility under 5 connections are considered Class D. There are also 12 sewer companies that the commission regulates. Only the Class A's are called large water, while the rest are called small water. A big difference between large water and small water, other than their size, is how the commission handles their general rate cases. The large water rate cases are reviewed in a formal proceeding involving an assigned commissioner and judge, whereas in small water, the rate cases are handled, quote unquote, informally by water division staff through advice letter filings. So the commission as a whole is governed by the Public Utilities Code, which lays out the laws and statutes. And from that, the commission developed general orders that are more specific. General Order 103A establishes the water service standards for the commission regulated water utilities to follow, and General 96B sets the work requirements for any and all filings to water division and how the water utilities implement their rates. The commission can also issue decisions and resolutions that the water utilities must follow. The jurisdictional responsibilities of water division are to set just and reasonable rates and the terms and conditions of service. Water division issues the certificates of public convenience and necessity, which is basically like a permit for the water utility to serve and charge water to the customers. We authorize infrastructure improvements and the rates to fund the improvements. And we make sure all the commission regulated water utilities are complying with new and existing regulations. So an easy way, I think, to summarize water vision and what we do is to just think of the board game Monopoly. You know how one of the properties you can own is called Waterworks. If the player was to land on Waterworks, they get charged 4 times or 10 times the dice roll, right? That 4 and 10, those are the rates that Water Vision would be reviewing to make sure that they're reasonable. So basically, Waterworks would not be able to charge a player 4 or 10 times that dice roll without Water Division approval. All right, so yeah, I hope that helps. The Public Advocate's Office. They are an independent entity at the Commission. Unlike Water Division, where our role is to advise the Commission, the Public Advocate's Office represents and advocates for the ratepayers at the Commission. They work across all industries, and their mission is to advocate for the lowest bill possible. And when dealing with water, they are mainly involved with the Class A filings.
Kevin, that was great background on everything that the Water Division does. I appreciate that. Let's check and see if there's any questions at this time.
Yeah, so it looks like we have a question from Jesse. Are there any opportunities for community gardens to have a lower rate on a different schedule in the city of LA? You address that, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Jesse. Thanks for the question. I guess it really depends on what utility you are under. The city of LA, there's a lot of different utilities under there. So if you could check with your utility that you're under. I know for some of the commission regulated water utilities, there are different tariff schedules that you could be under based on what your business is or where you're located. So just check with your local utility.
It looks like it sounds like it's under LADWP.
Yeah, so LADWP, that's a municipal government owned, so we don't regulate those.
Yeah, it's a important distinction, I guess, that because municipal they have their own commissions, that's where the regulation in terms of where the rates are to be set. LADWP has a commission. I believe they're appointed by the mayor, and so they're the ones who you're going to be dealing with, and they're the ones who will be able to address those issues. Kevin, you did talk a bit about the different parties that were involved in the proceedings. Do you become a party or choose a side in informal proceedings?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. Yeah, so Water Division, we don't become a party or choose a side. We serve as an advisory role at the commission, so basically we have to remain neutral and just work with the facts, deal with the technical stuff in the proceeding.
What about coordination with sister agencies? Do you work on other agencies in terms of like DDA, like Department of Water Resources and the like? What about the State Water Resources Control Board?
Yeah. So I think that'll be on the next slide. Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
talking about the sister agencies that we work with. Yeah, so mostly it's the State Water Board. There's a lot of overlap of the work that we do. So there's a lot of coordination there. Department of Water Resources, not as much, but yeah, I'll dive more into it next slide.
Great, then why don't we just go ahead and move on and get to the rest of your presentation.
All right, sounds good. Okay, all right. So the sister water agencies. These are the other agencies that deal with water utilities. So the first one is the State Water Resources Control Board. They are the agency that regulates water quality and sets standards for all water systems in the state. They also provide funding for drinking water improvements, are responsible for administering water rights, and they assess water systems to determine if a system is underperforming. So whereas the commission only regulates about 16% of the water utilities in California, the State Water Board pretty much regulates all water utilities. And I'm over here complaining about long drives. The other sister agency is the Department of Water Resources. They are the agency that manages the water supply in California, mainly the State Water Project, which collects water from Northern California and distributes them to different parts of the state. They also oversee the Groundwater Sustainability Agency that are formed locally to manage the groundwater supply. So we have the State Water Board, the Department of Water Resources, and the Public Utilities Commission. Simple way to remember the difference between the three agencies is to think of the State Water Board as water quality, the Department of Water Resources as water supply, and the commission as the monopoly board. And so, yeah, if this is the one takeaway that you guys can remember from this webinar, I'm gonna call it a good day. All right, so diving into the second half of this presentation, I'll be going into more detail of the priorities and goals of the Water Division and the actions we are taking to fulfill them. So the Water Division's priorities are to enforce the commission regular water utilities to comply with all the laws and regulations, review their critical service offerings and infrastructure improvements. We want the design of water rates to be fair and reasonable, and through the commission's environmental and social justice action plan, improve access to water for underserved and disadvantaged communities. The commission's mission and the takeaway from this slide is to assure water utilities provide clean, safe, and reliable service to their customers. So with those priorities in mind, Water Division's current goals are to increase coordination with the State Water Board on water quality standards, enforce compliance and standards that are set for the water utilities. We want to be able to measure the affordability of water service and assess environmental and social justice issues, address issues dealing with drought and conservation. We encourage well-run utilities to acquire water systems that are underperforming, and we want to implement legislative mandates effectively. So these are the actions Water Division is taking to achieve our goals. We are taking a proactive approach in enforcing water utility compliance. We try to do some outreach to utilities we might not have heard from in a while. So this is where the long drives and the bad knees come in. But I'm not just messing. Some of the drives though, like up through the mountains, are really beautiful. Anyways, Water Division just wants to make sure that our utilities are doing okay and prevent them from becoming at risk or failing. We meet and communicate with the State Water Board frequently to be on the same page. We are making sure the water utilities are prepared for drought or other emergencies and know their financial options that are available. We review the reasonableness of each new infrastructure investment and are taking into account, again, environmental and social justice considerations. We monitor the low-income assistance programs, which I will be going into more detail in a bit, and bill arrearage programs. We also provide support to utilities that are seeking to consolidate or acquire another system. Okay, just 4 more slides and I'll be done. The Commission regulated water utilities low-income program is called the Customer Assistance Program, or CAP for short. CAP provides discounts on water bills to customers that qualify. This program started in 2006 and is currently offered by all Class A's. The discounts vary by utility, but the eligibility is all the same, which is 200% of the federal poverty level. This mirrors the CARE program offered by the energy utilities. And the majority of the customers have been automatically enrolled into CAP through the low-income data exchange between energy and water utilities. To provide a little more information on that low-income data exchange, it was established in 2011 and occurs 4 times a year. The way it works is if a customer is enrolled in CARE, but not CAP, after that data exchange happens, the customer will be automatically enrolled into CAP. It works the other way too, where a CAP customer can be automatically enrolled into CARE. So the customer who didn't have to do anything on their end can now receive a discount on both their energy and water bills. I know as government folks have a reputation of being inefficient, but I call this a victory in efficiency, even though it's really the utilities doing all the work and we're just taking credit. In any case, the data exchange is seen as a success as it resulted in significant increases in CAP participation. Before the data exchange, there were roughly 100,000 enrolled. After the data exchange, that number jumped to 250,000. And currently there are about 300,000 customers that are enrolled in CAP. Water conservation, right? Even though we've had a bunch of rain this year, the next drought is always around the corner. That's why the Commission continues to encourage everyone to conserve, such as turning off the water when brushing your teeth, not watering your plants in the middle of the day, or in my case, trying to teach my 3-year-old not to waste water when washing your hands. Yeah, that's still a long ways away. The Commission has Rule 14.1 that allows the regulated water utilities to establish these voluntary conservation measures. When a drought does become serious, when it becomes serious enough, the governor's office will declare an official drought. And so when that happens, the utilities can file their Schedule 14.1 to implement mandatory conservation. Each utility Schedule 14.1 is different, but most are divided into multiple stages. At the beginning of the drought, it usually starts off at the lowest stage with a small amount of water use restrictions. And if the drought gets worse, the higher stages get implemented with more water use restrictions. And that could eventually lead to water usage allocations and drought surcharges, where the customer has to pay extra if they use over their water limit. Thankfully, in the last drought that just happened recently, we didn't have to reach that point. what we did several years ago, around 2016, during that severe drought where we had to resort to drought surcharges. Believe me when I say, like, the last thing we want to be as an agency is to become the water police. Neither do the utilities. It's not a fun time for the customers or any of us. Nobody likes being told what they can or can't do. I mean, I struggle with that every day with just my daughters. So to help mitigate and lessen the impact of the next big drought, the Commission, Water Division, we all will continue to educate and encourage conservation, even during a very wet year like this year. All right, last slide. As mentioned before, the Water Division supports acquisitions of water utilities, especially if it's an underperforming utility or a utility in a disadvantaged or underserved area. When there's opportunity for those systems to be acquired by a well-run, well-maintained utility with better resources, Water Division is all for that. That ensures the customers will receive safe, clean, and reliable drinking water. And unlike the Monopoly board game, I promise you this is the last Monopoly reference, where rates increase if you own all the properties of the same color. For acquisition, it's the opposite. One of the potential benefits is the increase in operational efficiencies, which could actually lower rates. So right now, the Commission is currently reviewing the existing acquisition framework. This framework lays out the process of how the Commission reviews and analyzes proposed acquisitions. Some potential proposals to improve and streamline this process are to provide incentives to acquire underperforming water systems, develop an accurate evaluation of water systems, standardize the way ratepayer impacts are analyzed, and increase the coordination with the State Water Board as they have the resources to identify underperforming systems and provide funding as well for improvements. So we understand how important acquisitions can be in providing safe, clean, and reliable water, and we are doing our part in supporting and improving that process. And all right, I think that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. I know we have a lot of questions to ask, and I failed to introduce our moderator for the chats for the Q&A session, and that is our wonderful BCO liaison, Chris Moore. Chris is the local government and community liaison for the Central Coast region of California. Chris, if you'd like to say a little bit more, please feel free to do so.
Thanks. Yeah, not too much more to add. I mean, the Central Coast is, of course, lovely. We've got a couple investor-owned utilities here, Golden State Water, and then Cal American and Cal Water too. So a few different areas right around the Los Osos area up in is Golden State Water. We've got around Santa Maria, Orcutt area with Golden State. And then down into Thousand Oaks, which has a mix. Anyway, I will, a couple, in terms of conservation, which I guess is one of their interests that we still have, I know that up at, say, around Los Osos, they still have restrictions. We had a couple questions about conservation, such as why are we talking about conservation? We had record-breaking rainfall over the past 2 years at the state level.
Yeah, so it's always a good time to conserve even during rainy years, because the way historically it's been the past several years, like it seems like every 3 or 5 years the next drought will hit us, and so it seems like it's a cycle where it's a drought, rainy year. So in order to best lessen the impact of the next drought, we want to encourage conservation, just so that we, like I mentioned, like we don't want to resort to drought surcharges where we would force customers to use water under a limit. So the best way to try to avoid that is just by conserving.
Yeah, That's a really good point, Kevin. And additionally, too, it's like California is also very complicated when it comes to water provision, and that many places are drawing from different sources. So even if the mountains may be full of snow, but if you don't have a connection through, say, the state water project, you may be on groundwater, which your local system may still be overdrawn and may not have fully recharged over the past couple of years. So these very much a lot to depend on local circumstances as well. Another question on the water conservation side, Kevin. Which agency monitors the amount of water that's available to California residents, and does the level of water influence rates as well?
Yeah. So that's a pretty way the water works in California. It's a little complex. It does depend on your area. But I guess when there is a drought, it starts from the top, from the governor's office. It spreads out to the state water board, to the commission. But it could also, if the drought impacts like at a local level, like at a city or county, that city or county water agency could also, implement their own water conservation measures. So yeah, it just really depends on where you're at, how much the drought is impacting that area. So it could involve from the local level up to the state level, and for the commission at least, we when we develop water rates, we do try to forecast how much water is will be used for the next year. So that is considered when we do develop the rates. So yeah, so if there's like models out there that predict that there's going to be the next drought, the commission does review that, take into account, and just to see how that affects the rates.
Can you, in terms of rates themselves, can you explain how we authorize funding through rates for new infrastructure?
Yeah. So for large water, the Class A's, every 3 years, there's the general rate case. So yeah, so it's a cycle for the Class A's. Every 3 years, they come in with a request for new infrastructure improvements. The commission reviews them in a formal proceeding, and so the commissioner, the judge, they review what's being requested. Usually, Cal Advocates is another party to the proceeding, and Water Division we act as the advisory technical assistance to those proceedings. So yeah, they go through a formal proceeding where there's public participation hearings for the customers to express their thoughts on the general rate case. They go through formal hearings. Just it's a whole procedure where it's an in-depth review of everything that the utility has done and is planning to do. And so after all that is hashed out, the commission issues a decision, and that authorizes so that authorizes whatever the commission finds reasonable to approve.
Are there any general rate cases that are open right now?
Yes, I believe so. I believe right now we have quite a few general rate cases going on right now, and yeah, it's every year there's a new one that's being filed and another one that's being closed. So yeah, every year there's about 2 or 3 general rate cases for the Class A's at least that are going on.
And how do people find out if there's a general rate case going for their utility?
Well, hopefully the utility has been noticing the customers, because that's a requirement. Usually the Class A's, they're really good at that. Another way, you can go onto the commission website. You can search up current proceedings that are going on right now. So that's another way. But yeah, I guess the best way is just to check utilities website or just contact them.
And why, in terms of if there is a proceeding going on, if there are public participation hearings going on, why is it important that people participate in these?
Oh yeah, it's definitely important just to hear from the customers, from the ratepayers, how the utility is doing, how it's impacting how the service is impacting them. So we it's important to hear, the end goal is we want to provide safe, clean, and reliable water to the customers, and we want to make sure that's happening. So yeah, it's definitely important to hear from the customers, and we encourage everyone to show up to these public participation hearings.
Yeah, I mean, rates is definitely an issue on people's mind. I mean, the state is not a cheap place to live. So that we've got a couple concerns about, especially for the impacts on low income communities. When there are water surcharges during drought communities, how are low income communities supported to ensure that their rates are reasonably proportional to their income?
Yeah, that's definitely tough. So yeah, there's that customer assistance program or a cap that the Class A's have to provide discount to customers in those disadvantaged areas. I know the utilities, they also during those extreme situations, they do offer payment programs where the customer can extend their payment if they can't, if they're struggling, they're going through a tough stretch. The utilities, they do allow customers to enter like an extended payment program. So there's a few options out there for customers, that aren't doing too well. The best way, yeah, I guess, is just to let the utility know, and they'll do their best to work with you with your situation.
Good. Are there plans to extend the CAP program to Class B and D utilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's like $1 billion question. The state currently legislation, they're trying to see if that's feasible to have like a statewide water low income program, because there's about, I think, 3,000 or more water utilities across California. So it's a lot of them are just really small with like maybe 50 customers. So it's an issue that's being looked at through legislation at the commission. We have all the Class A's. There are 1 or 2 Class B's that do have this is a low income business program, but it's how you say, it's a program that we need to balance, because the way it works is that the subsidized customers, those are funded by the non-subsidized customers. So usually, if that's the case, it needs to have a large customer base in order to provide enough funding to provide discounts for the low income customers.
So does that figure, I mean, in terms of the acquisitions proceeding, I think is that part of the thinking behind the acquisitions proceeding, is to try to expand the rate base?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah. So yeah, increase the customer base, that allows for more funding to be provided. And yeah, the Class A's, because their customer base is large enough, they are able to have those low income assistance programs.
Mm-hmm. Overall, I mean, statewide, I know it's going to be complicated for the state overall, but what do you think are some of the bigger challenges in terms of keeping water affordable and reliable?
Ooh. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of things that are going on that are increasing the water rates, increasing construction costs, inflation, just higher water quality standards. Yeah, there's a lot going on. You know, it's a challenge to balance, but you know, that's our job. That's what we try to do. We try to just you know, find the, the most reasonable rates that can be produced. At the same time, you know, make sure that utilities are able to provide that safe, clean, reliable drinking water to the customers.
Mhm. See, am I not getting? What was the question? Is there so water restrictions during drought periods can significantly affect businesses, e.g., example, landscaping, restaurants. Are there programs that support businesses similar to the CAP program for low-income families?
Ooh, I think not at this moment. I know right now there's like pilot programs that are being started, or yeah, there's some programs being started where there are, if it's a like an apartment building where it's under a master meter, but if it's like a low income uh, apartment, uh, utilities do provide discount for those. But I guess in terms of business, I guess that's uh, not at this moment. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right, we got another question about rates. So if there would be, if a low income rate assistance program were passed for public water systems, would that be extended to the IOUs, or would the legislation have to be specific to CPUC water regulated utilities? I mean, I assume that's how it would depend on how the legislation would be.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand that question. Yeah. So that's that was one of that's one of the issues or concerns that you know the legislation is trying to address. Whether if there is a statewide low income program, would it you know replace all the existing uh, customer assistance programs, or you know will they work in tandem, or how would that work out? Yeah, so that's currently a discussion that's going on how to just work that out.
Okay, so it looks like we've got some more general questions, sort of like bigger ones. So could you explain example of the division's compliance and monitoring enforcement program?
Yeah, so that's one of the programs that that's one of our actions that we are currently putting together to have water division staff just be on top, try to be on top of the water utility, just to make sure that they aren't, you know, I guess trending in the wrong directions. We want them to be in compliance with all the regulations. You know, we want them to be financially sound, to be able to, you know, continue and maintain their operations and to provide water to the customers. So it's more, yeah, I guess in the past, you know, we've been more reactive to if a problem has an issue, then we start helping out. I guess this program we're trying to be in front of it. You know, we're trying to, if you guys are doing well, we want to make sure that you guys can maintain it. And if you guys are beginning to struggle, you know, we want to try to address it right then and there instead of waiting until it gets real serious, and then we have to address it then. So yeah, it's just more of this program that we're trying to do where we're just trying to be more proactive.
In terms of desalination projects, are those on the radar still for maybe what role would you play in directing desalination projects for the utility
Yeah.
regulated?
Yeah. So that depends on if a commission regulated utility comes in with that proposal. You know, so it really depends on the location, the utility that's there. Yeah, so I know for Monterey, that's a touchy subject, desalination there. I know that you know there's been plans since I think the 90s to install a desal plant in Monterey, and it's still being dragged out. So um, we understand that desal it's a solution to the drought, but on the flip side, we also understand how expensive a desal plant can be. So it's that challenge of balancing providing that drinking water, but also manage setting the rates where it's not too expensive.
Right. Yeah, and I think we've seen San Diego. That's not in our jurisdiction, I don't believe, but we've seen that they've had a big project come online, and that's led to a big spike in rates. And I believe they have more water that's been net because we've had some wet years. They've had more water than has been necessary.
Yeah, in San Diego,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
They in San Diego they don't have. I guess their basin in San Diego there isn't barely any groundwater, so they before that desal plant I think they relied mostly on purchased water that came from the Colorado River, and so if that Colorado River has no more water, like San Diego was stuck, so that's why they had to install that desal plant just to diversify their water supply.
In terms of elimination of dams, such as Eel River, Feather River, etc., that may affect water supply or water quality and thus rates, does CPUC have any role?
Yeah, so no. I guess simple answer is no. That would be the Department of Water Resources. They're the ones that monitor the water supply across the state. So yeah, so dams, reservoirs. I'm glad we don't have to. We are responsible for that because I know that's also a complicated issue.
We got enough complexity to deal with. In terms of back to rates again, too, are payment plans or payment extensions legally required by the PUC for households that don't qualify for CAP, or is the availability of payments plans extensions on payment entirely up to the utility?
So okay, so we do, I guess, encourage a utility to provide those payment plans, and I think most of I believe the Class A's, most of them have it in their schedule that they have the rule where they can provide that extension payment plan. I guess in terms of the exactly how they extend it, for how long, for how much, we leave that up to utility because we know it really depends on the customer, the specific situation that they're in. So there's more leeway there on how the utilities want to provide that extension. But yeah, most of the Class A's at least they do have some type of plan to allow the customers to request an extension. Like I guess in the end we don't want customers to have their water shut off. Utilities they don't want that either. We want to make sure that customers have running water at beginning of the day, end of the day, throughout the entire day. So that's very important. We maintain that.
I think that's thank you, Kevin. I think that's all the questions I have.
Right. If there's no additional questions, we'll move on to the next slide. Joseph, next slide.
Actually, I'm showing Kevin is still in control.
Oh, am I? Okay.
You should just be able to left click to advance or click on the next, left click on the next command. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, again, one last reach out if there's no additional questions. And I'm going to just thank Kevin for his informative presentation today. And before concluding, I would just like to point out some useful tools for following our proceedings and actions. All of these links can be found by navigating from the CPUC's homepage at cpuc.ca.gov. I want to thank our audience for attending today. We can go ahead and end the recording.